Welcome to We Build Great Apartment Communities, the only show dedicated to the process and strategies for transforming apartment buildings to thriving communities. I am your host, John Brackett, and welcome to the show. All right, folks, this is John Brackett, your host. I have here another great guest. Her name is Corinn Altomare. And I believe I got that right this time, didn't
Yes.
I? All right,
Yes.
All right. So another great show, everybody today. I think very unique opportunity to meet someone who started in this business, acquiring smaller multifamily properties and has graduated her way up to, now diversifying their portfolio into self-storage and other commercial assets. So Corinn, very excited to have you on the show today. Welcome, and how are you?
I am great. Thank you so much for having me today. Really excited to be here and have this conversation.
I really appreciate you being here. So I'm gonna share with our audience just some brief information about your background. Okay, I'm gonna give them your bio, and then I'm gonna ask you a couple of questions, and we're gonna start diving in. So Corinn, here's something that I found very fascinating: that you are a classically trained musician turned real estate investor.
Sir.
So I love that. We're going to talk a little bit about that because I know that I'm a real big fan of the arts, even though I can't carry a tune if you put it in a plastic bag and handed it to me. But I love the arts, and I think that the arts really add a lot of creativity to the things that we do and makes us a lot more creative. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. But Corinn has spent 13 years in music, 5 years in IT project management, and 8 years in multifamily real estate, where she developed property management and syndication functions of her company, Hearthfire Holdings. So Hearthfire Holdings, most recently acquired through syndication, a self-storage facility that now has diversified your portfolio with an additional commercial asset. So really excited to talk about that. So my first question is this, okay? Tell us a little bit about how you got into this space, the transition and why commercial real estate, or why multifamily real estate as a starting point.
Yes. So I was a starving artist and I was lucky enough to come from entrepreneur parents. My father had has had his private law practice, and my mother ran a Montessori preschool, actually in Glendale, just outside of Los Angeles. So I'm a transplant to Philadelphia from the West Coast. That first winter was really rough, but I've adjusted.
No kidding.
So I spent a fair amount of time bouncing around the world, pursuing my musical ambitions. I landed up in Philadelphia, and thanks to my parents always wanting me to have some other sort of skill set to fall back on, just in case my career goals didn't pan out and I didn't end up at Carnegie Hall. So thanks to them, my father put me to work in his law practice when I was 16. And I always grew up around the family practice. My parents did have a small rental portfolio that my mother really managed. So I also have very early memories of just bopping around the properties with her while she was cleaning the drapes or vacuuming or whatever in between tenant turnovers and things like that. But all of that to say, I had a resume that ended up getting me an opportunity to work as an IT project manager while I was in Philadelphia finishing up a music contract. And so as soon as I landed that job opportunity, I started out as just a short-term contract laborer, but then they did approach me about converting to a full-time W-2 employee. And at that point, my father, God bless him, said, all right, well, you need to take that W-2 income, take it to the bank and get qualified to buy a real estate investment property so that if you decide you don't love it and you want to leave, you'll at least have some passive income to help support you through your artistic endeavors. So that's why I targeted multifamily first, because I needed other people to help me pay the mortgage. So the property that I did end up purchasing was a triplex with 2 tenants in place, perfectly situated for me to acquire as an owner occupant and move right in. And from there, I was dating my now husband and business partner at the time. We really got hooked together with the whole process of real estate investing and passive income flow and managing tenants. There were some ups and downs there, we learned. And we were both working in the IT space. So we threw a whole bunch of automation at how we operated and managed things. I believe I only collected paper checks that first month. And by the end of that month, we had our back-end systems built up. And from there on out, things were much more streamlined. And we built our portfolio from 3 units to, I would say, between 40 and 50 while we were both still working full time and doing a fair amount of travel. This was before our daughter, so we had free time in the evenings and weekends. Doesn't exist anymore, but we've made other adjustments since she's come along. So that's my, I guess, background and origin story, if that's enough of a start.
Yeah, no, really awesome. I really appreciate it. So, we're going through a change right now with COVID-19. Right. What are some of the economic trends that you are seeing in the multifamily space right now?
So we are, and when this first hit us, along with all the lockdowns and everything, we were, of course, worried about it. And as everyone else was at that point, we doubled down on our technology and we went full contactless 3D virtual tours for showings because we still had people moving and people still looking for new homes. And we now have a decent sized portfolio in Delaware County, just outside of Philadelphia, which is more solidly B-class assets, really good market for starter homes for younger families or just for more affordable apartments than some of our center city, right in downtown urban center apartments, which are going to be a premium. And so we were still getting demand. And so what we did to be able to accommodate that while keeping everyone safe and was to double down on 3D technology, virtual tours, and we have been able to place all of our vacancies within weeks. Some of them moved much, much more quickly than we've seen them in the past. I will say our Class B assets have been moving faster than our Class A. Our center city urban ones have been sitting a little bit longer than normal. But there are still showings, there are still applications. It's a little bit of a mixed bag of people trying to use unemployment to qualify for our income requirements, or because of the university demographic in Philadelphia. We're a big university town, so a number of our demographic skews younger. I would say not necessarily college students, but maybe borderline, so mid or later 20s. So we have that young adult demographic that are figuring things out. And if the city's locked down and they can't go out to the restaurants or the movie or the music halls or the bars, then maybe they don't need to be in Center City. So that's something that we're seeing a little bit of a shift right now. Luckily, with the market being completely overheated for these past few years, we sold off a number of our properties in 2017, 2018. So we really only have a few left in the city. And so we feel really good about that move that we took to diversify, go a little bit more towards Class B and also to self-storage, because we knew that the market could not continue the way it was. And we wanted to get out of the super high-end luxury that was just getting and is still very overdeveloped in Center City, Philadelphia area.
Awesome. So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. You said a couple of things that caught my ear, and one was doubling down on technology. And I think the focus that you spoke about was 3D technology, right? So can you elaborate on that? What product did you end up? It sounds like maybe you already had some of those features in place, but you made further investment to improve that.
We did.
And so what technology were you using? And then how did you improve upon that
So it's not new to the market at all, but up until now, it really has been reserved for the higher end multi-million dollar listings, but we use Matterport 3D camera technology. We negotiated with a local photographer that provides that service and said, we have a portfolio of 100 units. If we use you exclusively for all of our turnovers, what's the best rate you can give us? And now this is also when a lot of people were scared and just completely shut down doing showings. So this photographer was also looking for business. So it was a great time for us to have that conversation.
Sure.
And to help out one another so that we could keep our proverbial business doors open as well as him. Before COVID hit, the technologies that we had in place is we're largely a paperless office. We have 3 inherited tenants who pay us with paper check. Otherwise, everyone else is on electronic auto payments. We use Propertyware as our back-end management system. And then for marketing and leasing, we use a tool called ShowMojo, which automates the entire process. I create the listing once in ShowMojo. It syndicates it out to over 50 different listings. We build in, they have functionality to automate immediate response rates, auto schedule. What we do actually is just create a calendar for each listing. So we're not spending any time going back and forth trying to find the right time for the prospect. We just say we have showings one weekday evening and one weekend daytime. And if that doesn't work for the prospect, then they can reply back to us with up to 3 different day and times that work for them. Now we have those 3D virtual tours now. So the actual tour times are for Zoom tours. And then if the prospect is still interested and would like to see the property in person, they have to fill out the full application for us to verify that they meet all of our qualification criteria before anyone meets them at the property in person. So that was a mix of what we did before and during COVID. We're probably going to stay with this process, is there ever going to be a post-COVID? I mean, who knows? But we'll probably stay with this process because we're finding that it weeds out the window shoppers, right? The fact that you are requiring your prospects to apply and fill out all of that information and all of the supplementary documentation before they can see the property. It also protects our tenants. We start showing the property generally 60 days out, so we still have tenants in the unit. So again, we're safeguarding everyone's health. We're respecting everyone's lives. We're not coming through the property at all hours of the day or night. We communicate with the tenants. They know that we will stick to one weekday evening and one weekend daytime. And through the ShowMojo system, it automatically sends notifications to the tenants of when showings are scheduled and confirmed. And it texts them if there are any last minute cancellations so they know that they have their home back.
Sure. No, I really like that. I like the applying before the showing. You know, we actually are not doing that. We're doing it the other way. But fortunately, a really interesting thing happened. We bought an apartment building in Texas about 2 years ago, maybe almost now about 2.5 years ago, and we had this experience where we outsourced it to a third party. We did that once, didn't work. Did that a second time, didn't work, and then finally, we just built out a team out there, and it was really the best thing that ever happened. But because of that, it forced us to be able to operate remotely. And so we it was really more of a challenge to our team, right? I essentially said, okay, we're going to use this property as an opportunity to be able to operate assets from anywhere in the country. And now technically now anywhere in the world, right? So I really love what you described and how you described it, because the showing component of property management is absolutely huge. It's crucial. And so we built an entire system around that, but a big takeaway was the application first. And I really like that. I think that's very, very wise. And especially the reasons why you're incorporating that and how you're presenting that to your prospects. I think it's really, really neat. And I think that's a really big tip for our audience.
It was a big shift for us, right? Because you feel like you're putting so much burden that maybe people won't. And they'll just say, oh, well, I'll go see another property that's easier to see. But when you frame it, and especially for us with the 3D virtual tours where the prospect can literally walk through the building and experience everything. It's not as if we're trying to hide any part of the building from them. We're just, when you frame it as we're trying to take care of everybody's health and their home and respect everyone's time, then, and ideally the right prospect will understand, right? If that prospect doesn't understand and is really pushy about wanting to see it and breaking through your rules of your process, well, then maybe that's not a cultural fit anyway, no matter how much they love the property.
Yeah, no, I think that's great, and I really appreciate the comment there. So, here's something that I'm really dying to ask, especially with some of your experiences and the way that you're transitioning now, is what are the top 3 qualities that you see in successful real estate investors, whether it be residential, such as multifamily, or a commercial asset, mixed use in your case, self-storage. What are the top 3 qualities that you see in successful investors?
Hustle, grit, not taking things personally, and learning at every opportunity. That was 4. You can combine one of those somewhere.
You know what? And just leave the 4 because they're really valuable. They're very, very good. So why do you, the first one, I get it, right? The first one, I get it. I mean, you have to be active. You have to be constantly creating opportunity and looking for ways to improve. The second one, grit, that's one that I really believe in. So can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think that's one that is often overlooked or in many cases rarely talked about. So talk a little bit about grit. Why do you think that's important?
It's shark infested waters out there, man. I mean, you have to be able to. I think this is where my previous career in music, which is not easy by any stretch of the imagination, and the thick skin that I built there really comes in. We had the toughest time breaking through from small multifamily into larger multifamily. I don't know what the experience is in your neck of the woods, but at least out here, that's a different big boys club. And you can have all the money in the world behind you when you're inquiring on an on-market listing. If they don't know you or know somebody that they know who's vouching for you, you're not going to get your phone calls or your emails answered. And so rather than letting that beat you down, you have to figure out a way to either get to know someone who knows someone or figure out another workaround. For us, it was saying, okay, well, we'll pivot to self-storage. And we made some great connections there. And I think you asked an earlier question about why I went into commercial, and I don't think I answered that. But so essentially, we pivoted to self-storage because we had investors, largely our family and our very close friends, that we felt huge responsibility for in giving them other financial opportunities for themselves and for their family and legacy. So when we weren't able to make it work in multifamily, just based on our criteria and based on what we were seeing in our immediate market, we wanted to figure out a way to serve them. So we went into commercial, we went into self-storage, and are very happy with that pivot there. So grit, you have to have it in order I think, to get through the negotiations, to get through all of the legalese and the contracting debates. And you don't have to be a jerk about it. You can have your own flavor of how grit is personified and how you come across in your interactions. But there has to be some sort of inner steel for you to get through some of those difficult days, whether it's contractual negotiations with a broker seller, or whether it's a tenant who's having a really bad day and complaining about absolutely everything wrong with the property and it's all your faults. That's where not taking it personally comes into play, because we manage so many of our own properties. It's very difficult to not take those complaints about the property personally, because we've been very much invested. I mean, our first property, we sanded and painted and did the plumbing and electrical, and we're hanging drywall. So we are very personally invested, but figuring out a way to balance that and realize that the tenant is not complaining about you personally, and trying to see where they are coming from and figure out a business solution for all invested parties. That's a big one. That's still one that I work on a daily basis, treating everything like a business and being able to remove the emotions out of it while you're troubleshooting and trying to think up some sort of resolution for everyone involved.
That's really good feedback. I think what's really interesting is whether it's this business or any business, one of the reasons why I love reading biographies, especially of people that have built businesses and built big things, is it never fails. Every biography, anyone that has done anything substantial, okay, they always go through challenge, not once, not twice, but usually a couple times. And it's almost part of a theme in business. And so I agree with you. I think resilience or resiliency is a topic that's very under discussed, right? It's not talked about enough inside a business. But business, by its very nature, if you want to build a great business, a great enterprise, something that'll be around well beyond you and I are, right? When we are no longer here, it just requires a different level of resolve, right? Because this is a long-term business. And I've learned that if I take that viewpoint, if I take that mindset and I wake up every day with that viewpoint, things come together, right? Every day just focusing on one thing that absolutely matters to moving the needle forward, but it's a long-term game. And so I really appreciate your insight and how you shared that. So I am going to move on to another topic. This time I'm going to get into a little bit more strategy. Okay. So you talked a little bit about how you're pivoting to self-storage and the reasons for that. And the obligation that you felt with your investors, because you weren't really being able to identify what you felt were investments that made sense, right? For not only your company, but your investor base as well. So, when you're making an acquisition, or the acquisitions that you're making, or the successful deals that you see put together, how are these acquisitions being capitalized currently in this marketplace? So, how deals are being capitalized 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, probably a little different than how they're being capitalized now, debt and equity, right? So what are you seeing right now in this market, especially for your own investments, or it could be for colleagues, right? Or just a trend. What are your observations there?
So just from within a few more immediate or recent projects, we acquired in 2019 standard 75-25, so 25% down, 75 from a local bank. They are interested in continuing to work with us. They're very interested in the self-storage space, so they want to continue to work with us for our next few acquisitions. The numbers, the splits that we're seeing now going forward will probably be more 65-35, if that answers your question.
Sure.
Yep.
And why, what is the logic behind that split? I mean, based on how you're underwriting, why that split in particular?
I can't speak to that.
Meaning,
that's what we're hearing from the local bank. It's more being more conservative with their lending.
Oh, the bank is. So yep. the bank is expecting at least 65% leverage and 35% down on the storage, the self-storage space. Yeah. Okay, makes total sense. Thank you for sharing that, because it's one thing, Corinn, to hear people talk about that. It's another to actually hear someone who's actively making investments, speak to that, right? It's one thing when you hear, someone on a call or, a friend speak to how investments are being done. Totally different story when you actually speak to or hear someone who's actively investing in real estate. So thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate that. And do you find that, why do you feel the bank or your bank or this bank or the banks that you've worked with in the self-storage space, why are they a lot more open to self-storage? What's the attraction there to the lender?
Well, self-storage is not just a real estate asset, it's a business. And so when, at least in our conversations with this local lender, when they are underwriting, they see all the additional ancillary revenue streams that support a self-storage facility. We're not just renting out apartments. There are also truck rentals. There are sales of merchandise. There are ways to, in real time, dynamically adjust your pricing. So it's run in a way that really distinguishes itself from multifamily, at least from what we're finding in our 1 year of operating at this point. And there just seems to be a little bit more of an appetite of going into that space. It could be entirely hype at this point, but again, this is a local lender. Some of our criteria is that we wanted to stay within a 2-hour radius of where we physically are so that we could be very hands-on in the operations and management. So we're partnering with businesses that are invested in the community and see what's going on the ground. So from what we're hearing from them, they liked the fact that with self-storage, we have 300 tenants at one property. So there's much more balance against the risk of having one vacancy and then not being able to pay your mortgage if you have a single family home and then your tenant moves out or becomes unemployed or whatnot. We have 300 tenants to balance that. The stabilization rate for self-storage is traditionally 50 to 60%, where we could be up to 50% vacant and still be able to carry our business expenses. Yep, that's a general rule of thumb. That's not a specific, but all the other operational attributes that get folded into self-storage are why it was very, very exciting for us to look at, and then also for lenders. And I know you're a multifamily show, so I don't want to talk too much about it. We're talking about multifamily, but that's what we're hearing from the lenders. Yeah.
So, the fact that we spend time discussing multifamily real estate, I think is great. But when it's all said and done, this show really is about meeting great people who are doing great things in the commercial real estate space, right? At the end of the day, what we're really about is building great communities and using real estate, leveraging real estate to be able to do that. In your case, you've done that with apartment buildings, and you're also doing that with self-storage. So it fits great. It fits very well into what we're about and what we do. So I appreciate you sharing that. Okay, so now I'm going to get into a fun question because we're getting ready to wrap up the show. I'm going to get into a very fun question. So what was the most profitable multifamily investment, or investment rather, that you've ever underwritten and purchased? Okay. And then what do you think made that investment so profitable? So walk our audience through this story. Everybody loves a great story. In real estate, you never have a shortage of great stories, and some not so great. So can you share your experience there with your most profitable investment?
Ooh, okay. It's going to be a three unit in Center City, Philadelphia. We bought right and we sold right. I can't take credit for it. We got gosh darn lucky on it. But we partnered with a developer, and there is a 10-year tax abatement program in Philadelphia for new construction. So this developer had a pipeline of abandoned, foreclosed, or otherwise extremely distressed properties that he would acquire from the city. Full gut rehab. By this point, we had known one another, and so we walked through the property from acquisition to demo and build out. We had the opportunity we had a handshake deal on it. We had an opportunity to weigh in on how to configure the space, how to set up kitchens, bedrooms, and bath for optimum, really being able to drive the rent rates as much as possible based on the layout and the sizes, picking out finishes and all of those sorts of touches on the end, right, to make sure that it was really easily marketable. And then we sold at top of market, and that one we got our investors 24% IRR within 3 years.
Nice.
Buy to sell.
Nice.
Yeah.
Good stories, good deals are always good, right?
Yeah. We had it fully leased up before it was done being built.
And why do you think that was? Was it a combination of location and the design and price, or was it really location driven? Was it price driven? Was it design driven?
It was location, and it was us hustling, because we had at that point a few other triplexes in and around the area by the same developer. So we were able to put the listing up and say, this is by this same developer. This is what that finished project looked like. You can walk through it now and see the studs. Here are the floor plans. Here is how we operate, and just being completely transparent and upfront with any interested prospects. And people were completely fine with walking through while it was being built and saying, yes, I want this. Here's my security deposit. Put me down for whichever apartment it was. So we had it fully leased up before it was done and before we actually went to the settlement table.
Awesome. So now last question is, what was the least profitable investment that you've ever underwritten and purchased? And then share a little bit about, share that story and of course the why, right? The why behind it.
Sheriff sale, single family. We had never done any flips, and everybody was talking about fix and flips. And so we went to a couple sheriff sales, kind of scoped it out, figured out who all the big players were, just kind of got a feel for that whole approach.
Right.
Purchased a single family in a good area that we knew. You couldn't walk in. We did a drive-by the morning of, that sort of thing. On paper, we made money. But at the end of the experience,
I like how you said that. On paper, we made money.
We are technology operations people. So the amount of time that my husband spent on the site, making sure that the GC was there and running the crew to get it done on time, it wasn't worth it. And so that's why whenever people ask, and I lead a local meetup for women in real estate. And so a lot of them wanting to get started, fix and flip single family seems to be the entry point for a lot of people. So I always caution them and say, yes, and if you don't have a background in construction and you don't have reliable contractors and you've never managed that before, just think about the cost of your time and what could potentially go wrong and just how long it could possibly take and all the other possible downfalls. I try not to be too much of a Debbie Downer, but also try to just
But you're being honest though, right?
Experience.
You're being
right.
completely honest with them. You're being completely honest, which is really valuable. But I like that, the thing that I heard the most inside of that conversation was return on my time, right?
Right.
Is make sure that we're involved in investments that are going to generate not only a profit, but also a great return on our time. So I'm going to speak to this because this is something that I see a lot in this business, right? So I think one of the mistakes that I see people make in this business, and I really try to be disciplined in this area. Not always, I don't always bat 100, or I want to say bat. Yeah, I don't always bat 100. But a good friend of mine told me this many years ago. He said, "Hey, John, and he was buying 100 properties and literally flipping 100 properties a year, and he's buying at the auctions." One of my very good friends started his business up in LA, and he's done extraordinarily well, but he's been doing it for about 10 years longer than I have. And this was almost 9 years ago now, but his comment was, that he gets people approaching him, and these are large hedge funds, to partner, right? To partner with him. And, I asked him, I said, well, why don't you take the money? Right? He goes, well, John, if I'm doing roughly around $10 million now in revenue, and I'm netting $1 million every year, and I get another 10, now I go to 20, but I net 2 million and I only keep $1 million, I'm buying $10 million worth of more headaches for the same amount of profit. He said, no, thanks. Mm-hmm. And I never forgot that, right? I never forgot that. And so the principle there was, don't look at size, don't focus so much on units, rather focus on profitability. Because, I bought some small properties in the past that have been extraordinarily profitable, still in our portfolio today, right? Great return on time, very low maintenance, and a great return on cash, right? And of course, in really good markets where the upside is very high, because high demand rental markets, right? Now, I think the only downside when you're buying smaller properties is you don't get the leverage you do, right, with units. But the same opportunity is true when you're buying a 100-unit property or more, right? It's still really paying attention to the same principles that you are buying into if the property were smaller. The only difference is, right, the dollars get bigger, okay? And the way that you look at risk probably is going to change a little bit. And of course, how you're bringing teams in to manage that asset. But I really, really appreciate what you said about return on time. Very rarely do I hear people speak to that. And I think those are the things that you can't really talk to unless you kind of go through with experience, right?
Right. And everybody, I mean, he lost 2 inches off his waist because he was working so hard with the cut. So he was proud about that, but he was so achy every day. And we're all traveling our own journey in real estate investing, right? We all have our own goals. For some people, it's wanting a passive income stream. For others, it's wanting to be able to quit that 9 to 5 and do something else and be the master of your own destiny. Right now, we're also experimenting with, I'm going to use a term I heard on another podcast, location independence. We spent 6 weeks living on our 29-foot travel trailer in Cape May, New Jersey, and running everything remotely because we have boots on the ground here. We have a leasing agent now because we've grown to a point where we're at that next phase. We're going through some growing pains and figuring that out. But being able to experiment with, okay, well, can we make things so technology focused that we can live and operate from anywhere as long as we have trusted advisors on the ground? So that's our next step that we're playing around with. But everybody has their own goals. So it's easy to get caught up in the numbers or what everyone's latest highlight reel is on social media. But if that's not what you want to accomplish, if that's not where your strengths lie, forget about it.
Yeah. No, I think you speak to something that's so true, right? Is get really clear on what your objectives are and build your business around that. For me, it was wanting to spend more time with my family and wanting to be able to choose when I work and when I don't, right? I mean, today I went and worked out with my 14-year-old daughter around 10 a.m. We went to a park here locally and we trained, right? Because she's a basketball player. She loves ball, and that kid just loves fitness. All my kids do. And I spend time working out with them and just doing fun stuff. But would not have that opportunity, to your point, if, I didn't get clear on what that was, what I valued, and then built our business around that. And frankly, I think one of the best things that happened to us is we were forced to be able to operate remotely about 2.5 years ago. And so it's completely changed how we do business and how we can live our life. And so I think that's awesome. And I'm going to continue to encourage you to pursue that. And I'm also going to reach out to you for some tips because I can tell that, you're a great operator. And so I want to congratulate you. Also, thank you for being on the show. I mean, I think you've provided a tremendous amount of value. I've taken about 3/4 of a page worth of notes. And so I'm sure our audience has taken just as much as that, So thank you so much, Corinn. Really grateful to have you on the show. And for those that want to reach out, to speak with you or learn a little bit more about what you do, how you do it, and why you do the amazing things that you do, how do they get a hold of you?
Email is probably best. Good old-fashioned email, Corinn, CORINN @hfireholdings.com. And look forward to hearing more from you and from many of your audience. We are here to serve and share our joy and passion about real estate investing for all. So
awesome.
Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. And thank you for participating and sharing. Really appreciate it.
All right. Take care.
Take care. Clarity of purpose creates our greatest competitive advantage. When we transform apartment buildings to thriving communities, we improve how people live and create assets with high profit margins. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this up with a friend. I'm John Brackett, bringing you things you can implement right away.